Great.
Well, we are so glad you're here. Hopefully everybody had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and just welcome to start the year off and hear and kind of what's going on school district-wide. So before we start, Joe, if you would, if you've worked for the district, just your role, what you do, your name and your role for the district.
Joe Martin. Gary Versoy, Secretary of Education.
Jason Hoffman, CFO, COO.
Frank Underwood, Facilities, Transportation, Safety, and Security.
There we go. And welcome. We have Kim. Sue, yes. Working my way back there. Thanks, Sue, for being here. Kenny and Law and Lorelei Schwartz, two of our board members. Thank you both for being here this morning. So, we're going to talk about the primary topic here is the consideration of start and end times from when we start school at our 18 schools. And so Jason has a presentation. He is going to leave before 8 o'clock as we are presenting to Bel Air staff at 8 o'clock. So they know I'm going to be late. Jason's going to leave a little early. So we will do the question and answer time regarding this as soon as he's done. So, and as always, I want to be very informal. If you need to go, help yourself with coffee. If you need to leave, whatever. This is just a come and go. It's not like a sit down. I know we have you rode up and it looks like we're in classroom. The bell rings and then but it's not going on. We want this to be very informal. If you have questions along the way, please raise your hand. So Jason's going to do that. Carrie's here with Architects Alliance. Mitch, Dale are here with Naples to kind of give us an update on our construction projects. So we're excited about that. So the start end times, Jason, I'll just turn it over to you, Jason. And as always, we're trying to, how can we get better? Our vision to be the premier school district in the state and look at how we're doing things, and then they can be tweak, change, or keep them the way they are. And this is one area that we are considering. So Jason, I'll turn it over to you.
So, the way our busing system works, we have a tiered routing system. So and I'll explain what that is and why we do that. So we have a contract with First Student, and so when they send a bus out, and let's just use an example of a Thomas Jefferson route. The bus leaves the First Student location, it runs a Thomas Jefferson route, and it comes back to the First Student location. That costs the district $44,000 a year. So if that bus, if we had a bus that went and ran a Thomas Jefferson route, went back, we spent $44,000 on that. If we had a second bus that went and ran a Bel Air route, that would be two separate single tier routes, and that would cost $88,640. So,
Bill, just get in there for you. You tell me which one to hit. We did the speed line. There we go. I got it.
So if you see it's $44,000 for a single tier route, if we have a double tier route, the cost is only $49,000. It's only about $4,500 for that bus to run a second route. So in that example I gave before with two separate buses, if instead of having two separate buses, that TJ bus, we spend $44,000 on that TJ bus. If that bus then, instead of going back to the bus barn, it runs that Bel Air route, second, we only spend $4,500 on that Bel Air piece versus $44,000. And if you think about it, it makes sense. First Student has to cover all their overhead in that first route. They have to cover the cost of the bus, the cost of running the First Student location, the management, the maintenance staff, everything has to be covered with that first bus. So if we use that bus again, it's really a little bit of wear and tear on that bus and the driver's salary. So we try to do this as often as we can because it saves us quite a bit of money. So unfortunately, the way we have our current bell schedules, it's not set up to run tiered routing. you see that we have all of our secondary schools basically start at 8 o'clock, 7:50 or 8 o'clock. And we need every single one of our buses that we have to run for these schools. So then we have our elementary schools, and we have the 2 in Callaway County that start at 8. We have the 2 on the extreme east and west, start at 8:15. We have 4 schools here in the middle that start at 8:30, and we have 3 schools that start at 9, and early childhood special ed is around 9, and then we have Southwest Early Childhood. We don't provide busing for them, but just putting that on there. So you see, we've made it pretty hard on ourselves to do efficient tiered routing. So those secondary routes, I told you we need every single one of our buses to run all of our secondary routes. And the average secondary route is 46 minutes. Some of them are shorter, but obviously some of them are then longer. So, but 46 minutes is the average, and you saw that we don't have 46 minutes between our start times in a lot of places. And because it saves us so much money to do tiered routing, and we haven't put enough time to really do it, we're not getting the service that we really expect from First Student, and it's really our fault. We've given them a problem to solve that they can't solve. There's not enough time to run a TJ route and then make those 8:30 schools, especially then those 8:15 schools. So obviously you can't tier North and Callaway because they start at 8 o'clock and we need all of our buses to run the secondary. So all the Callaway County elementary routes are single tiered routes. We can't really tier Morrow Heights and Pioneer Trail. So what we do in those cases, which I'm not a fan of already, is we do K-8 buses with Pioneer Trail students. So we have Thomas Jefferson and Pioneer Trail students on the bus together. And at Morrow Heights, we actually have a few K-12 buses because we're running the extreme east and the extreme west sides of the district. So running them three times isn't efficient either. So trying to be efficient, but then putting that large grade span on the same bus isn't ideal. So I told you the average secondary route is 46 minutes. We have to take the very shortest of those to try to make some of them tier with the 8:30 schools, but there really aren't enough of those to really work. So our only schools that really tier well are Bel Air, Cedar Hill, Lawson, and ECSE. So here's what we do currently. We have 26 single routes, and we are able to double 37 of our routes. Ideally, if money wasn't an option, we'd have everybody pick their time and we'd run single routes, but that would cost $1.5 million more. And we don't have $1.5 million more to do that. And I think probably an even bigger issue is we would need 37 more bus drivers. I think that would be impossible as well. We have a hard enough time filling our drivers that we have today, let alone needing to find 37 more. So as we bring on Capital City High School, it's pretty efficient delivering everybody to one location. Now we're going to deliver to 2 different locations, so it creates some inefficiencies in our secondary routes. So First Student has done a really good job for us, and they've said, all right, if we don't change anything, what does it look like next year to serve transportation for our students as we open Capital City High School? And they expect we're going to need somewhere between 5 to 8 more buses as we open Capital City High School. So each bus costs about $45,000. They're going to be single routes. So it's going to be somewhere between $225,000 and $360,000 of new spending on transportation next year, which also means an additional 5 to 8 bus drivers that are going to be hard to find. So then we said, all right, I need you to run projections. What does it look like if we have a 1-hour time difference between, we take all of our elementary schools, they're 1 hour different than all of our secondary schools. And I was surprised, they ran it with elementary first and secondary second, and then they ran it again with secondary first and elementary second, and there was no financial savings to doing one or the other. But there is savings to having it all, having an hour difference. So it allows more time for double tiered. So instead of spending $360,000 more next year as we open Capital City High School, we will actually reduce buses and we would save $160,000. So an apples to apples comparison, if we run transportation next year without doing anything, we're going to spend $360 more. If we change and have a 1 hour spread, we'll save $160. So there's a $500,000 savings for us to make a change to having our times and hours apart. And then, if we give ourselves that hour, then we have the time to get the service that we need. We can get students on the second tier delivered in time in the morning to eat breakfast. We can have the bus there in the afternoon to pick up students instead of teachers having to supervise students and wait on the bus till it gets there after the bell time in the afternoon. So what we're looking at, we have two options right now. One with all the elementary starting at around 7:50. That's not set in stone. It would be somewhere between 7:50 and 8 o'clock probably. And then an hour later to all the secondary schools. And then option two would be exactly the same times, just flipped. So we've been through this a few times, so we know a lot of the pros and cons to this. As we've looked at this in the past, one of the main reasons we looked at it is there is a ton of research on the development of adolescents. The American Academy of Pediatrics, this is their #1 platform that all secondary schools in the United States should start after 8:30 because of the adolescents are changing. Brian's got a lot of research and we're going to get it up on our website soon, and so people can see, but adolescent kids need to sleep in later. They have a hard time going to sleep at night, and there's a lot of research that show that instructionally it's better for them if they start a little bit later. There's less scientific research, but there's a lot of anecdotal research. If you talk to teachers at our 9 o'clock schools, they'll tell you that our younger students really struggle late in the day, 3, 4 o'clock with learning. They're tired, they're worn out, they've been up early. I know with my children, I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. I know my 10-year-old on the weekends, he's up at 7 o'clock every morning and he's ready to go. And now my 12-year-old, he's starting to sleep in till 8:30, 9 o'clock, I have to get him out of bed. So I can see that, just my anecdotal information with my family. So if you think about it, the elementary routes average around 20 minutes and the secondary routes average around 45 minutes. So if you're running your shortest routes in the morning, it's only 20 minutes, that first stop in the morning is going to be not as early. So that's... Since we need to use all of our buses to run our secondary routes, it will free up actually us to add more second tier routes at the elementary schools. So it only costs us $4,500 to add a second tier. So if we can do that and we can shorten bus routes, if we can decrease the number of students on buses and it only costs us $4,500 versus $45,000, that's a much easier decision for us to make. So we think we can reduce loads on elementary buses. Our high school student drivers would not be driving at the 8 o'clock rush hour time, move them back to around 9 o'clock, so now they're driving after the morning rush hour traffic. And one of the cons that you're going to see in a minute is that high school students are going to be getting out later, and there are issues with that. But what we found as a solution to this is high school schedules are much more flexible than elementary schedules. We can offer a 0 hour, and we're looking at that. Gary has met with the counselors, and it would be a voluntary 0 hour. There wouldn't be transportation, but if there were students that really needed to be gone earlier, they can't stay till 4 o'clock in the afternoon for some reason, they could take a 0 hour course and then leave an hour early. We also have work study programs at the high school level. So just the flexibility of the high school schedule. So as we've looked at this in the past, this is the biggest thing we've heard is that, and it is a real issue for our families, is that currently with all of our secondary students getting out first and our elementary students getting out second, the older children are home as the elementary students get off the bus, so that is the child care for our families currently, and that is people rely on that. And if we make this change, that goes away, and people are going to have to figure out what to do with their elementary students at the end of the day. Like I mentioned, we do have a lot of students who need to get to work. We have employers that rely on our students to work for them early in the afternoon. So that is a con, but we think we can work around some of that with flexible scheduling.
And the work co-op.
And the work co-op, right? We know how fun change is for people and how much people enjoy change. Well, obviously, one of the cons is this changes nearly every start time of every building in the district, so it's changing a lot. The only buildings that don't really change are the two Callaway elementary schools. Everybody else is making a pretty dramatic change in their times. We know that after-school activities, ball games, practices, clubs, those are going to now, instead of if they're starting at 3 o'clock, they're going to start at 4 o'clock. Obviously, they're going to get done later in the evening. And if you have your longer routes happening later, that last stop in the evening is going to be later than if you did the elementary. And then we operate Nichols Career Center, and we have other surrounding schools that send their students to us in the morning. And so we met with the Nichols staff this week, and we actually think we have a solution, at least for next year, that we don't know that we need to change the start times for Nichols. Since they serve our sending students in the morning, they could go ahead and still start at 8 o'clock, take care of all their sending students, do the Jefferson City and Capital City students in the afternoon. And then those students, they're really a building of their own. They could actually leave an hour earlier. So we don't know that we need to change their start time. So I think our suggestion, if we go this route, would be that Nichols wouldn't change for next year, and we'd give it a try and see if it works. And it seems like it would work. I don't know why it would have to change.
Before you hit the next button.
Yep.
The after-school activities that go later in the evening, we're going to have a conference with the three Columbia schools, Hickman, Rockbridge, and Battle, and they start at, is it 8:50 or 9?
Well, I think they do 8:50 to 4.
8:50 to 4. So they have made that change. So with conference schools and start times for a golf meet, let's say in the spring when it gets dark earlier, your track meets, those that do not always have, cross country, let's say, that does not have lights, your track, they can have lights to go in the evenings. But we know that's a concern, but they've made that shift, and as a conference, we recognize that's something that we'll have to coordinate and work through.
So as you switch the times, really it switches the cons to pros and the pros to cons for the most part. The pros, they will keep that where older siblings are home in the afternoon to take care of elementary students for our families. We're changing fewer schools. We're just moving some of the elementary schools to later. All the secondaries would be about the same. After school activities would finish earlier. The cons, it would be going against the research for when's the best time for our secondary students to actually receive their learning. This is a new one. So if you think about it, we need all of our buses to run our secondary routes. So if you have an elementary school that starts at 9 o'clock and it wants to do a field trip, that bus has to be back for that field trip by 2:30 so it can get to the secondary buildings to run those routes. Because if it's flipped, and if we have a secondary school that's starting later and it needs to do a field trip, that bus, we have enough we'll still have some single tier routes, so that bus can do the field trip, and it just has to be back in time in the afternoon to run just the secondary route. And somebody mentioned when I've done this before, well, can't we just have some extra spare buses? Well, our contract now says we have 5 spare buses, and we use all of those buses currently doing out-of-town sports, other types of field trips. We're already using all 5 of our buses, and now we're going to go to having activities for 2 high schools. So that's something we probably need to look at in the contract, because we're going to need more spares anyway. So having our longest routes in the morning, that means that first stop in the morning is going to be earlier for students. And then this was pointed out to me, I hadn't thought of it earlier, but now it's going to cause an issue for our families in the morning. So now elementary students, we don't have school till 8:50. What are parents going to do in the morning if they need to be at work at 8? We're not opening school till 8:50. Probably open schools usually do a half hour early, so it'll be 8:20. So we're causing issues on the other side. So what we're doing, this is part of what we're doing. We're collecting feedback. We've met with the board and they've asked us to go forward to continue to collect feedback. We're going to our third school. Larry mentioned I'm going to Bel Air right after this. We've been to JCAC and Nichols this week. We have 2 community town halls that are scheduled, Lewis and Clark on January 29th and Thomas Jefferson on January 31st. The thought is we will come with a recommendation to the board at the February board meeting for approval at the March board meeting. Did I miss anything?
So what questions, feedback? I'll just a couple things from the lens here. There is at times one of the top 5 comments I hear at Walmart or church or my kids' ball games is about our buses. And I want to I got my CDL to drive a bus to have a better lens of how it works. And there is at times of a square peg in a round hole of how we can get better with our buses. And I'm not saying this is a silver bullet, but I know it's been looked at in our district a couple other times. And how can we be more effective, more efficient? And now with the transition with the second high school, we need to examine this. And with stewardship being one of our 3 pillars, if we can save $500,000, we'd be nuts not to consider this. So with that being said, we're just trying to work through this, gather input, thoughts. So what thoughts do you guys have or questions? I know John is expert, and Frank and some other folks here with regards to our busing and how it works. What thoughts do you guys have? Yeah.
Good morning. I would just share as a parent, I appreciate your concerns about the start times changing. My wife and I have had students in Jet City schools for the last 12 years, from elementary to middle school to high school. And because of the buses, our start times have changed every year anyway. You know, the buses have come 20 minutes before school, the buses have come 25 minutes before school. So for us, I appreciate all the talk about change, but for us, it changes every year anyway. So I would add that to your discussion that for many parents, our start to the school day has changed every year anyway.
Yeah.
So that's really not what we do.
And we would like some consistencies. I know I had been here about 3 weeks, and on a Sunday morning radio call-in, and a guy called in and said, "Why can't all your schools start at 8 o'clock?" Like, that's a really good question. I don't know that answer. So coming back, that we could, but with some of the tiered, but as you saw in our elementary times, we have 8 o'clock, we have 8:15s, we have 8:30s, we have 8:50s, we have 9. And some of you can probably give some input on why, but for a variety of reasons other than folks that it worked better for them to have certain times, and we would like some consistency so folks could plan accordingly. That is one positive of that, so I appreciate you sharing.
From your meetings with staff, faculty, I know you only had a couple, but any sense of what the feedback sounds like from faculty and staff?
Well, just so far with JCAC and Nichols, and it was very much in support of. They saw the need for, and then they looked at it, and especially Nichols, if they could continue, because they're sitting schools that bring their kids to start at 8 o'clock. We know that's a concern, and if we can have to still allow them to do that, I think they see the benefits of that, because they agree that the research does say secondary students starting later, but they also have a workforce. Most of you do not go to work at 9 o'clock. Many of you do, depending on what your work schedule is, but as a general rule, we want to prepare our students for the there we go. Dale, you all right? Okay. For the traditional, being prepared to go to work with that. Yeah.
Something else to consider for future, it may not be major factors. I know the Jefferson City High School, I heard earlier, there's not the most sparse parking available. You have 2 schools, you're going to have to park
We will, and that was brought up to me yesterday, so we're gonna have the amount of students. Well, no, we're estimating from 1,800, let's say, to 1,200 at Jeff City High School, because we'll have half of 4 classes there versus all of 3 is in 10 through 12 versus half of 9 through 12. Good question, good comment.
John?
Having the buses, having a bell time that allows buses to get back to the elementary schools for dismissal time will be a big help to the teachers and staff. That's a challenging time to manage students who are ready to finish with instruction, not knowing, is the bus going to be here when we dismiss? Is it going to be here 10 minutes late, 15 minutes late? That would really be a help, I think, to teachers and staff to have a bus there when the bell.
Right. So John not only knows transportation from his former role, but his wife taught at South, an 8:30 school, and that's one of the schools that we've had a hard time getting the bus there in the afternoon at 3:30. So they're supervising kids till 3:35, 3:40, 3:45 sometimes. And so instead of them getting onto their meetings and what they need to do at the end of the day, they're having to extend their day.
South, east, and west are those schools that are 3 schools that those first tier routes are so inefficient because you've got to bike load them to get them to that second tier at 3:30. So
Right.
you can't build a full route between those routes.
We can make Thorpe a little better because its location near the high school.
Yeah.
Right.
If you go back and look at the history, those were 9 o'clock schools at one time.
Right.
And they tried to squish it down. So either for a little late or the bus is not there in the afternoon, just get us an earlier start time. Earlier start time is what we're trying to accomplish.
Right.
So that's part of it.
And I think Lori would say, our Director of Elementary Ed, of staff development district-wide is an area that we've all determined is that we can, a huge opportunity. And so we cannot right now have a second grade PD after school at this day because they all start and end at different times. So that would be a positive that we could have moving forward as a consistent. So. Anything else, anything about transportation start times or input or thoughts?
Tracy, are you able to post that slide real quick that shows the original start times? I really want to see how many elementary schools, I mean, you talk about significant change. Well, I guess the other's only 4 that start at 8 or 8:15.
Hit it one more time. Get the elementary. Excuse me.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to see really
Sure.
how many schools we're going to need.
So we have our first we're going to Bel Air. They're a 9 o'clock school, so we'll see what their staff thinks about it here in just a few minutes.
Good luck with that.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jason, for that. Carrie, would you give an update on our building projects? We've got, where's Dave? Dale's sleeping.
Dale's over there breaking.
Dale's breaking things. Hey, Dave, if you're gonna break something today, break that versus breaking something at the Tennessee High School organization. So, Carrie, would you give what's that? Well, I asked Carrie here, you may ask from high school.
Tell me if I do wrong, okay? Start with Jefferson City High School. We continue to work on Nichols Career Center A and B, which is the ground level of Nichols Career Center. It's been virtually gutted, going back in now with drywall. Simultaneous to that, we're now working on Area C, which is the connector between the 2 buildings. So doing subgrade work, vapor barriers, getting the land ready to pour concrete. So Area C has started and it will last till 2020, January 2020. The Nichols Career Center work will finish up January 31st, and then we'll be going back to Area F. Area F is the science labs. That's important to remember that the science labs were completely gutted over the summer and abated, but it wasn't time to renovate those, so all the science casework, the old lights were put back in after all of that, and kids have been having science this year on, frankly, concrete floors. Now it's time to go back and take that science down, like I said, Area F, and it will be renovated after Nichols is finished. On site, Don Schneider's Excavating here in town have been doing the prep work on the grade for the Area C, Area A and B Area C, the new connector. Harold Butzer is working on site for rough-in plumbing in G, and you also see some RTU plumbing, RTU cleaning going on. Meyer Electric from here in town. It's on the top level of Nichols Career Center, working on light fixtures and the generator transfer switch. The lower level, the main level of Nichols Career Center is now being painted, so it's a very aggressive schedule to just have been tearing that up, and now painting is going on in there. Same with QuesTech Constructors. They're on the last sections of Area G, as well as Condensate and Nichols Career Center. Circle Contracting, you've heard here in town. They are over there working on exterior concrete stairs from Union to Lafayette, that enormous staircase, repairing that back. Pilasters, vapor barriers in Area C, and drilling for dowels rods. DJ Weiss is doing ceilings and framing in Nichols, and Nichols Career Center will look very different after this renovation. It was a 1970s construction. It's well past time for a major renovation, so in addition to HVAC renovation, all the square footage will be changed. It will look a lot different, a lot updated. I think there'll be a lot of school spirit when that happens. Jeff City High School is 22% complete. That's kind of hard to imagine because some areas are done, like Area G, some areas haven't started. So in terms of dollar expenditure, it's about 22% complete. And I will say that it's amazing the amount of work that's happening. Last month, over $2 million were spent in labor and materials at Jefferson City High School. Is that right, Dale? So the pay applications coming through, that just tells you how fast and how much work is being done. $2 million worth of work last month at Jeff City High School. What else can I tell you? Oh, going on to Capital City High School, it's a little easier to understand the percentage complete. Capital City High School is 45% complete. Mitchell continues to run pre-installs for the meetings prior to when the work's done to establish the level of quality. Mock-ups continue, and masonry has begun on the storm shelter at Capital City High School. There's two different shelter types. One is a gym, the other is a locker room in Capital City. There's a good reason that those are different if you want to talk about that. What else? Temporary windows are put in at Capital City High School, so the work will be going on inside. There's temporary heat. As windows are arriving, they're being installed, so you'll see that going up. Remind everybody that Capital City High School is a compact footprint to save on site costs. So the interior rooms, how we get light to those is clear story windows and openings in the floor to bring that natural light down into places that don't have natural light. The same thing was done at Jeff City High School when it was built, but it was a courtyard built. So that both of them have pretty major attempts at the geometry to get natural light to unlit spaces. What else can I tell you? Synthetic turf. We were hoping that bids would come in favorable for a lot of the site work options, a lot of the bid alternates. They did. And so we're able to put some synthetic turf at Capital City High School, but Adkins, seems like we just renovated that. It's time to replace the turf. So early this year, Adkins, you'll see that turf being replaced, and then they'll immediately move over to Capital City High School and start that. Both projects remain on time and on budget. Is that right, Dale? Is that right, Mitchell?
On time, on budget, two very nice words to hear.
Yeah. No, it really is an enormous amount of information. And I can't say enough about the construction manager and contractors that are working, but also the district staff. They have a district to run, but they're also heavily involved in working with contractors and the logistics of both sites, really. So, I know there's a committee that's been working on graphics and logos. That's been a lot of work and a long time coming. That work's now being incorporated into the project, whether it be graphics in the school pride, stuff like that. So the new logos, the new color schemes, all that is being incorporated into the subcontractor's work. Any questions? Thank you.
One thing right here, Ryan, could you zoom in a shade? This is on our district website. I know one thing at the very beginning, being transparent, where are we throughout the project? This here, how would they get to this?
From the homepage,
Yes, just so everybody kind of knows how to get there.
there is a link on the left side over here.
Real quick, I'm interrupting, excuse me. jcschools.us is our district webpage, and then from there,
Renovation and construction updates.
okay, click on that.
And that takes you to this page where there's a link here to the timeline.
Okay,
That's what you were wanting to see, Vic?
I was.
Okay.
Did you hit one more plus?
Uh-huh.
There we go. So you can just kind of see, here's where we are. This is from 80,000 feet. Obviously, it's not getting in the weeds, but this kind of gives an overall picture of where we are. So we're right in here is where we are, between the November of 18 and so forth. So any questions on that, specifically of Capital City or Jeff City High School, on any parts of that? Yeah, there. I believe November 1st, is that correct, Mitchell? Okay, track in December. So it's not August, and we know that, and that's one of our challenges right now. We have Simonson and the gymnasium there. We know as far as physical education classes, volleyball in the fall practices, utilization of how we can use Simonson, how we can use TJ's gym, transportation there. I believe, am I correct, Mitchell, on an area for physical education in Gary at Capital City High School to start the fall without having the official gymnasium. Is that correct? Where are we on that? What's this?
Well, like for our weight room, we will use a classroom temporarily. Also, we stay on the timeline, the turf will be installed. So for like band practice, PE classes, so we will have facilities will be complete, comprehensive list of facilities. You know, when we have to have your PE classes, no, it will work.
Okay.
Might add that the transition over to Capital City, at Jeff City High School, we've gone to great lengths to keep construction separate from students. And we have not had to do that at Capital City. We'll have to do that next couple of meetings. So, that's a pretty big deal to keep those activities separate. I know they're going to great lengths to maintain safety and construction.
We do appreciate that because that is a huge ensuring student safety. We have students right now, I guess 750. Awesome. Right. I appreciate you sharing that. It truly is being stronger together, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, because it is frustrating. I'm sure from just outside the norm, Jason touched on earlier, change is pain. But it is student safety while we're still ensuring a quality education for our students each day. So thank you for touching on that. So anything else on as far as with Capital City or Jeff City High School on renovation wise?
I like that last thing that's going on right now, because everybody around here is very good until for us, last night, I don't know, we'll start to see schools out of the ground.
And that is A versus B.
Yes.
Just for clarification. No,
The blasting's done in very small increments. You could blast the whole thing at once, and that would be very pretty, but they blast just a few feet down, remove that, blast a few more feet down, so it's underground blasting.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. The last thing is a topic I wanted to touch on, and Gary, I'll ask for if you'd come join me. Actually, the consideration of a traditional scheduling versus block scheduling that we're currently in. That's a topic we've discussed yesterday. We're going to discuss this morning at Bel Air. Not in depth as in Bel Air at the elementary, because it's a secondary 6 through 12 of our current block scheduling, and why looking at the pros and the cons, how can we become premier. We talked about reading being our #1 goal. Dawn gave me yesterday, we have of our K through 9 students, we have not officially, but 24 to 25% or a fourth of them, which is around 1,500 students that ended last school year 3 or more grade levels below grade reading level. Okay, and I hate even saying that. Okay, but that is and it's with scheduling at the middle school level of having more options to where they can have a reading 101 every single day as an option at our middle school level. So it is it churned my stomach saying that, and we've not said that, but it's something to where we need to address that in substantial measures versus, well, it's just the way it is these days. Well, we can't do that. We can't accept that. So, Gary, do you want to kind of touch in on how we got where we are with our staff, the administrators, I believe that came to you?
Right.
And
so,
kind of go from there.
First of all, I know in the last 5 to 8 years, and especially at the high school, the schedule changes. I think they had 3 different ones in 3 years, and I can only imagine how painful that was. This year, where this started earlier this fall, at one of my monthly business meetings, which is all my secondary administrators, we were talking about course programming as we open up Capital City High School, like what courses, what does our sequencing make sense? We just wanted to dive in and be more thorough and comprehensive with our conversations and getting ready to open a second high school. During one of those meetings, the question was asked, what about our master schedule? Obviously, if we were going to change a master schedule, we would normally start earlier, allow more time, but when the administrative team shared with me that they're hearing lots of comments from the teachers that Gary, or they weren't saying it to me, we don't have enough time to teach the content and teach it well. That alone deserved our utmost attention and our immediate attention. So let me talk about quantity here. Right now, basically a block schedule allows you to do a full course in half a year as opposed to a traditional schedule you have all year. So the way our schedule is right now, our 4-block schedule is, each class is 84 minutes long, times 87 days in a semester. So you just do the math, 84 minutes times 87 days, and you have that chunk of minutes. You compare that to a traditional schedule, whether it's 50, I did 3 scenarios, 50 minutes, 55, or 60. 60 is probably not realistic. I would like to get a traditional period between 52 and 55, but that's where we're getting the details from the buildings, what's going to work best. But if you I took 50, 55, and 60 as kind of ranges, and if you take those amounts times 174 days, you gain about 5 to 6 weeks of instruction.
Meaning, so if it's Algebra 1 is a freshman course, you take it first semester, 87 days at 84 minutes, and then they don't have Algebra second semester. They'll wait till they're soft. They won't have any math, let's say, second semester. Versus if you have 50 minutes a day for the entire school year of 174 days, at 50 minutes, that's where you gain the 6 weeks. So having math all year freshman year, all year second year, versus now we have first semester possibly freshman year, off second semester math, off first semester sophomore year, and they have a year gap until they come back to math, maybe second semester sophomore year. That's just one example.
And just the pace of instruction is extremely difficult for many of our students to handle. And so when that came up, just kind of in that meeting, I don't know, I'm sure the conversation's been taking place off and on through the years, formally or informally, about a block schedule and a traditional schedule, but it really took off earlier this fall. And so some of the things that we talked about was, as we got more and more feedback, we really feel like we had very strong support for this change, and we do. Just the minutes of instruction, we think is easily going to benefit 80 to 85% of our kids with that extra instructional time. Now, like I shared with the board, We're not forgetting about those 15 to 20%. Here's that 15 to 20% that I described. Your more accelerated kids. Your kids on an accelerated path who can handle a faster pace of instruction. So what we're going to do, it's easily the number one concern about the changes. Okay, what if I'm a sophomore or a junior this year, and I had my 4-year plan, and under a block schedule for your sequential courses, like I could have, if we keep our block schedule, I was going to take this first semester next year, and then I was going to take that next sequential course second semester. You can do that in a block. So what we're going to do with the transition, the counselors at the high school are already working on it. They're looking at students' 4-year plans. They're talking to students. What's your plan? What do we need to double block in a traditional schedule so that we can accommodate to the extent we can those students who want, especially if you're going to be a senior next year, you're like, I'm going to take this first semester and this semester. We still make it happen by double blocking a traditional period. So, but I will say this, any schedule is 100% of all student requests. I've been in both schedules as the principal, block and a traditional. And what you do is student course requests drives your high school schedule. Okay, kids who want to do this, we need many sections of it. Does drive our schedule. Counselors are looking at talking to students and seeing, okay, how do we make, we don't have a schedule and the kids in it, we get the students and they get around them. We try to meet as close to 100% of those questions as possible. So there's other talking points about the change, engagement and learning of students, whether it be 6th grade, 7th grade, even juniors and seniors. So we think, again, I'll end with what the amendment gain through 12. That alone is pretty significant.
And there are more, research-wise, there are more schools that are going from block to traditional versus traditional. And when you look at just from a lens of the amount of time, we're not saying idle hands, but with idle hands that, you know, kids find, we know student behavior is a concern. So having more structure, we see as a positive as we move forward. And what we're doing, gathering input, at JC staffing, we're going to all our schools when we talk about times of transition to ensure for the kids with so we make sure we help them reach their potential, but we cannot. All their level staff agreed. This is what's best for the 80 to 85% of the kids. Is what they would say. Sure that this is helping, but we have an obligation for 4 kids in my house. I'm responsible for 9,000, and what is the best for them to move? We have that many kids below reading level, K through 9 level. What are we doing to attack that? That there needs to be a sense of urgency with this. Again, this is reach that through what that looks like to the double block, and that's not even to say as we move forward in the transition of those kids potentially years from now of having at that some courses having double block. Best we work together and gather feedback throughout.
At the middle school level, is this even middle school? How schedule? Now the overall minutes will go down slightly for, I think we clearly gain a win in that. Right now, if you have somebody in the middle school or 82-minute block of math first hour one day, and the next day it'll be a 41 block late afternoon. So You have a class as a have it the next day, half the time in the afternoon, and then depending on what school you're at, you have different alternate days. This brings some stability. I can only imagine a 6th grade family coming into our district for the first time and trying to figure out the schedule. Now, there's people wonderful jobs of explaining that, but this will allow a middle school kid to have the same class, same time, every day. I will say there are some classes that you still can benefit from having every other day, like some of your special art, music, but a lot less of that. I think it's going to smart middle schools.
Any other questions or comments on that?
I'm curious, block scheduling is, I understand what you just said. Without doing one now, there's a longer time period between algebra 1 and algebra 2.
Can be, potentially.
If there is this longer time period, but do they forget it, need more review, they start over now?
Research will say that you lose, the retention decreases, yes.
They brought that up yesterday, that as far as with math teachers, that they take the first 2 to 3 weeks just trying to get caught back up and refreshed versus math is important. Reading, English, literacy, how important that is, a daily repetition. Absolutely, and literacy primarily.
My son had started accounting yesterday, and he hadn't had accounting class since last year. And he said, I was the only one in my classroom who knew what debits and credits. I mean, so, because it had been so long from accounting to accounting two, he said, we're now going to go to a little refresher period before we can even start our instruction.
So instead of that 3-month summer slump,
Right.
like Dr. Linthicum explained earlier, you could have Spanish 1, it could be other classes, first semester this year, not have Spanish 2 until second semester next year.
And what we're at the middle school level specifically, I'll stress on, we are working and we're going to need to communicate with families here very soon is, if you end this May, 3 grade levels or more below grade reading level, that you will be required, starting this fall, one of your courses will be reading.
An additional reading.
An additional reading. And it will be whether it's 6th grade, reading 601 or 701 for 7th, 801, whatever it is, to directly address that. In addition to their normal courses, but that gives us the flexibility.
Having 7 periods instead of 4, or 5 with your fast periods and your advisories and all that, that gives you some more flexibility to do things like that.
So, if we don't have any other questions, I normally always stay here as long. I need to be at Bel Air in 7 minutes. They know I'm not going to be there at 8, and Jason is going to get started now. But we are gathering their input about the start times. Bel Air is a school that starts at 9. We're having from 8 to 8:50. We're presenting and gathering their input on the consideration for start times. So, I would invite you to come see me, cup of coffee anytime. I prefer that versus an email or a phone call, but a face-to-face I would enjoy. Yeah, Derek. Yes. Well, Bel Air, Lawson, Cedar Hill, I think are 3 that are 9. Is that right? Is there?
There are 3. They special.
Those 2.
Early childhood.
Yes. Derek, when we get those phone calls, Derek, I'll have only 30 minutes. Derek said. There we go. Thank you guys for being here. I apologize for leaving. Come see me if you have any questions.